Nostalgia is a double-edged sword. While we fondly remember something, we become trapped in a cycle of ignorant bliss. Our childhoods weren't focused on work, they were focused on forming friendships, going to new places, and taking in the world around us. For us, this world was larger, colorful, and our growing minds have now seemed to embed these places in some neural void that we can only continue to see in our dreams. But through these tinted glasses, we still think of these places as real. The mall that was once packed with eager customers, play areas, and the smells of fried food are now abandoned. They sit slowly rotting away, their concrete cracking, the storefronts becoming vacant, and the play area paint slowly chipping away from use. This is not a place of memories anymore. It is merely a corpse left by time. When the pandemic started, the concept of liminal spaces became popular all throughout the internet. Of course, liminal space referring to a transitional area or a physical space that is used to travel, not stay, and this could be hotels, malls, gas stations, etc. Of course, we probably already all know this because every day we go on TikTok and we find some 10-year-old kid that's proclaiming they found a liminal space when they just took a picture of their bathroom. And while this spawned groups like the Backrooms, Timeless Places, and countless other spin-offs of what people perceive to be the Backrooms, I don't really want to focus on those groups, at least today. Instead, I want to focus on an event that happened near the end of 2020, though was kind of overshadowed and became popular as in 2021. Of course, this requires some background. At the beginning of 2018, rumors started to spread that hackers, part of an anonymous image board on 4chan, managed to reach Nintendo's servers, steal data, and then spread it across the internet. The first few leaks contained smaller rounds, such as earlier ROMs and Pokemon designs, while, of course, it picked up in traction, and much of it went by the wayside. But in the second half of 2020, their payday was massive, including information about the SNES, N64, GameCube, and Wii with their retrospective games. Notable inclusions include Star Fox and Star Fox 2 data, an official Game Boy emulator, Super Mario World beta, and of course the topic of this video, beta content for Super Mario 64. And just like that, the internet started passing this information around like kids on a playground were talking about passing rumors. Did you go to this level? I could have sworn that this enemy was somewhere around floor 2. Wait, you can unlock a Luigi? Huh? The Green Man? Huh? The fuck? Of course there were other files, other discoveries, other celebrations, because this lost media was technically now found after videos of a Space World 95 build emerged onto the internet in the early 2000s. But now we had a conundrum. The world that was never meant to see any of this except for its creators. It's a lost era, a missed reality. Now, while these discoveries were widespread across the internet, the branding of Mario as something more than just Nintendo's mascot was always something to behold. A single game that shaped the landscape is not just what was capable in the 3D space, but the introduction of these worlds was a silicone phenomenon to the people in the 90s. It's crude now, sure, but the key difference comes forming one's nostalgia over the environment itself rather than the artist themselves. This sounds complicated, but let me break it down. I recently picked up Dana Arnold's short book about art. The book is split up into 6 sections about art history and aesthetic criticism that is easier for someone like me to enjoy. These sections are looking, materials, mind, devotion, power, and sex. And if you're interested in reading more about this, I'm going to be putting a link in the description for where you can buy it. It's going to be on Amazon. For this video, though, I wanted to focus on the mind section, and the section deals with triggering mechanisms when looking at art versus reasoning with it. When talking about how we have conversations about art, Dana brings up Immanuel Kant, which was a German philosopher famous for many works in metaphysics, ethics, and aesthetics, and Jacques Derrida, a French philosopher on deconstruction during the late 20th century, and she states the following on reflecting on their ideas. Like Kant, Derrida's argument for the distinction is an important touchstone of art, where the aesthetic is a legitimate field of inquiry based on the sensation rather than the reason. The broad historical span of these inquiries gives us some indication of their enduring significance for understanding of art and its processes and meanings. For us, these debates open up the possible ways of thinking about art and the mind. To the human mind, the connection made to these games, or art in this case, comes down to the emotional attachment used through the senses, then critically thinking about the ideas that the video game pushes. For Mario's design and his world, they trigger a childlike wonder with their colorful palette that most people grew up during Nintendo's iron grip of the video game market in the 80s and 90s. And to say that they are timeless adds to the point that the Mushroom Kingdom and its cast are not affected by the passage of time in any of the games. And of course, this is backed up by people saying, oh, there's this connection to this game, and there's this connection to this game, through sequels, spin-offs, and whatever. But to try and solve some multi-layered plot like your game theory, it's almost useless. It's fun to try and expand these worlds and wonder into the finer details, but that is just a consequence of our gained knowledge as we grow older and become detached from these fantastical worlds. However, then, this begs the question if one can feel nostalgic for games that they have never played during their childhood or adolescence. At first, this seems impossible based on the interaction with games and the intellect that we possessed at the time. The world felt larger to us, and now it's grounded by answers and numbers. We can't be 5 again, it's impossible and deems us immature. But the reality that the sense of lust for the past has been in movies and literature for as long as we started writing and filming. So, take a recent film like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, directed by Tarantino. For the movie, with its work in character, setting, attire, slang, and even the visual effects, they were meticulously crafted to show the different age of California and the Hollywood culture. One half of the challenge in creating a convincing story is to establish the feeling of the time period. Once, of course, the genres like Western and fantasy, it can be harder or easier to replicate those feelings because of the rules put into place to illustrate the limitations within the work. It's the same way if you can give 10 different artists the same canvas, and each one comes up with a different way of turning the canvas into their own work by pushing the limitations of the idea of a canvas. In the last 50 years, video games have become a part of the arts, since it has been pushing stories, philosophies, graphics, and more through the interactivity with the player. When we think about other forms of media such as film, they have always been pushed by the evolving society, technology, and passionate creators that wish to spread their own vision, a message, even if it is not their own. So, for one to observe how they could perceive this almost untouched beauty, in this case, Mario 64, one must be cognizant of their emotions and the way that they feel. And while I could go on about how we cannot truly understand beauty and some other critic stuff, I don't want to become a teacher that you probably doze off into class to. So, now we have to see how B3313 entered the picture for me. For the last couple of months, I've been getting into ROM hacking, and I was interested in the N64 era because it was an era that I missed out on. I jumped onto the PlayStation 1 and 2 when I was a kid. And once I realized how to patch ROMs, get ROM hacks working, I had an infinite amount of new Mario games to play that were created by fans. And then B33 appeared on my radar, and a couple of larger YouTubers such as Joel and Vinny from Vinesauce started to play it. And with the aim of the mod, as Joel put it, being Super Mario 64 mixed with Yume Nikki, I just knew I had to play it. So without further ado, what was my experience inside the internal plexus? So of course, after all this artsy stuff I just talked about, I haven't even talked about the mod yet. What's it like? What the fuck? Okay, if whatever I've shown you right now interests you, just go play the ROM hack for yourself. I can't show you how to set it up and whatever, but I'm going to be leaving a link in the description for K's Emanuar, and there you can go find his steps on how to set up the emulator and what you want to patch out, and of course other information. Okay, let's first talk about the levels. That's the most coherent part of this mod. When I first jumped into this mod, I knew it would be like experiencing some recreation of some beta assets, but tapping into the uncanny was something that I never expected to happen. For example, let's take the levels in the game. In normal Super Mario 64, the levels were compact, but they were filled with different paths that the player can go to collect the stars. In this case, B33, the levels feel more empty or incomplete, or they're just completely reworked altogether. There's this one level that is supposed to be Cool Mountain, but it switches between a volcano and a grassy mountain, presumably before Cool Mountain was covered in snow, and this enters the wacko realm of the uncanny. I know that the term has been thrown around like leftover pizza at a hungry frat house, but it serves an interesting purpose. For the uncanny, as Freud defines it, it talks about the feelings of uncanny being used in objects rather than environments, an example being a doll in his essay. And while he never defines the environment, the example from Cool Mountain brings up how the brain is trying to piece together back the memories of what would be how you originally played the level. And this memory is not derived from us wanting how to remember the area for nostalgia, but having a similar reaction to a clean memory. For many, to play something very similar to the original level, but slightly off, will throw someone into an uncomfortable place. Of course, this has existed in horror for years, where the character either emerges back into a room that they're familiar with, a doppelganger, etc. But with the interactivity for the player trying to beat this game, it is about collecting the stars, but it's also about now switching to what is so different about this place. Why is it different? Of course, this isn't the only example. Every level is some kind of beta version of the mod, but there are multiple hubs in the game that one can spawn in. There are, I think, 3 or 4 in total. From the map, yes, this is the size and the complexity of it. Each one of the hubs can lead to different areas, to find cap switches, finding more stars, or even other exits to go to different levels. The success in this mod not just lies in finding the stars or finding new areas, but also finding loops that can come back to other versions of the hub. And while I don't intend to break down every level, most of the levels come from the internet rumors and lore. As I stated, around the time of the Nintendo Gigaleak happened, there was the popularization of something called the Mario 64 iceberg, and a couple of items on that iceberg were implemented into the mod. If you don't know what an iceberg is, it's basically the amount of knowledge known about a particular thing, so that means everybody knows about it or nobody knows about it at all. And one of the most famous parts of this iceberg is the personalization AI that was used in the Nintendo 64. Now, of course, there's no AI in this console at all. I mean, for God's sakes, the thing looks like a toaster. But essentially, the personalization AI would personalize one's experience while playing a game, and Super Mario 64 was the largest catalyst for this. This would explain how people would see other levels, different enemies, different stars, different bosses, etc. And, of course, these would be stuff like Peach's Castle, a sewer system, sub-basements, and more secrets that I can't just talk about in this video alone. just know that many of those locations are either original to the beta feel of the mod, or just rumors and speculation that were happening after the release of the game. At first, the music is nothing to write home about. It's just a multitude of original remix tracks using the M64 sound font, as this is a popular way to implement stuff into the Mario 64 ROM hack community. But these range from The Legend of Zelda's Forest Maze, to haunting tracks like Big Boo's Forest. And while these tracks are good in their own right, I think they add a variety to the mod when trying to explore the internal plexus, as it's called. One of the most chilling examples is the remix of Dire Dire Docks, titled The Eel Graveyard. The music just slowly creeps in like a lullaby. It's almost the feeling of you're drowning. It's a very open experience, to say the least, and even with the script that I've written out, I have trouble finding words how to really describe it. I'm now just going to leave some examples on screen for you to take in and figure this out for yourself, but know that the soundtrack is very interesting, and not all of it will gravitate towards you personally, but I think it's really cool, and I think that adds to the eeriness that the mod has in some places. Now, this is going against the idea of forming a plot from earlier, but there are hints of a story throughout this mod, or at least an internal struggle. After all, the castle that continues forever doesn't seem to make sense inherently. So this is what I gathered from bits and pieces. The internal plexus, like I said, is a personalization AI, and even though the personalization AI derives from the levels, I feel that maybe it could be put into Mario and Luigi itself. After all, Luigi was cut content from Mario 64 in general. And of course, while the two plumbers are trying to save the princess just like in any other Mario game, it seems like the personalization AI that is rumored breaks down as they continue to head deeper inside the castle. There are rooms that are completely walled off with giant X's, creepy courtyards, of course these faceless Mario NPCs. It's very hard to define what even is going on in this mod, and even though there is a completion to it, it feels like you're just looping the cycle again. This isn't some multiple ending kind of thing either. This is just find all the stars, defeat Bowser, and you go on your way. But that isn't really the true intention of the mod. It's to show how one can get so lost inside these walls, and even through signs, as I found myself throughout the deeper parts of the level, it explains how it almost seems like they're trapped there, continuing to figure out some kind of way out. Now, could this be the plot? I don't know. I think that really there is some coherence of being lost, but I'm not sure if that's just because of the internet lore or any creepypastas that maybe have been popularized within the levels. If there is one thing that I can say, though, that I think the Yume Nikki vibes with this really do emanate with me. If you don't know what Yume Nikki is, it's essentially just an indie RPG game where you play as a girl named Matsuki, and you explore her own dreams while she refuses to leave from her apartment. And of course, many of these dreams are wild in appearance, and there's not a single word of spoken dialogue throughout the entire game. So, while I think there is a story to piece together from this, and there is apparently a 1.0 of this version of the ROM hack coming out, which I find insane, I think for now it really is about the experience of just going through this internal plexus, finding strange levels, finding interesting sights, taking in the music. It really is something to behold, so that's where I would probably leave it. Even after completing this mod and trying to find everything that I could, I still wasn't satisfied with my findings. This led me to try and contact other creators, either within the Mario 64 hacking sphere or creation, or just other general people outside of some of my knowledge of music, to say anything about the mod. This led me to first contact Greenio, the creator of the Classified series that dives into the Super Mario 64 beta creation, and some other animations on YouTube. I asked some questions over Twitter DMs and just asked her general experience with the game, and I will be now reading the answers that she responded with. Because of your series and wanting to try to show how other people have captured the feeling of nostalgia through these earlier builds of Mario 64, do you mind if I ask you some questions about how you capture that in your series, as well as general questions of how you look back on Mario 64 and the console itself? I can't say for sure objectively how I managed to capture the nostalgia aspect of my videos, but I can use my own experience. I just really needed to look back at how I saw the game when I was really young and didn't comprehend the concept of the system's limitations and such. At any point, the game could give me something new, and at the time it only felt like I needed to explore deeper to find it. To me, the whole personalization copy mythos really leaned well into that. Rather than go for the chaotic mess angle that a lot of portrayals do, I only really wanted to study and perfect the geometry style that vanilla maps had, so that my stuff may feel familiar yet distinctively alien to someone who's experienced with the game. As for Super Mario 64 and the N64 itself, I don't think I'm quite in the position to judge since it was before my time. I first played Super Mario 64 on the DS and later experienced it on the original via Virtual Console on the Wii. I didn't grow up with it, with what can be considered the original experience, but having tried it later on without the nostalgia for it, I've grown to see Super Mario 64 as very flexible. It's no wonder it's been used for Machinima's ROM hacks and such, because it's such a creative game to begin with. One's mind immediately thinks of what to do with it rather than just be an observer to it all. It's really more than a game at this point. It's becoming its own platformer as art. While this game revolutionized 3D games and platformers at the time, if we excuse the nostalgia factor for a second, do you think that the restraints in the engine make it more memorable? I ask this because a lot of N64 platformers, Space Silicon Valley, Glover, etc., are remembered, but more as a weird experiment with the hardware rather than the potential for expansion, like SM64. I do think that the restraints have a lot to do with it, yeah. Like I said, when you're a kid, it feels like the game can go on indefinitely, and your mind fills in all the blanks left by the limitations of the hardware. It's a game that gets you to think outside of the box because it's so focused on the game experience rather than the whole technical prowess of it. It's not to say that later games took advantage of their hardware any worse for it, but they don't allow you to think much more beyond what they have to offer because of it. After I reached out to Greenio, I wanted to talk more about the music. I mean, after all, in my section, I thought it was the most memorable parts of the mod. So, not really knowing how to deconstruct music, I reached out to the exceptional Bucket of Jake to help me condense my thoughts. So, without delay, I asked him what he thought of the soundtrack, and he responded with this.
The human memory is an extremely vivid place, while at the same time being completely unreliable. Like, I can tell you exactly where I was, what I was doing, and what I was wearing when my mom got me my first 3DS. While on the other hand, if you ask me to repeat quiz questions you said to my face 2 minutes ago, I'm gonna look at you like I have dirt for brains. And I think in between those two ends of the memory spectrum rests nostalgia. The area of the mind where wearing rose-tinted glasses is enforced. When I was presented with the music that's been talked about thus far, I can absolutely see why a large portion of people who listen to this would experience nostalgia. But I was also fascinated with the actual sound of the music, because it kind of sounds like what nostalgia is. It's that blurry rose-tinted view of the past where you feel like it's the best time of your life when, if you really look back at it, you're only focusing on certain parts. That's kind of how the music is produced, focusing on certain parts that make it vaguely sound like the original. I think my point is explained perfectly from this YouTube comment I saw. It kind of sounds like someone who last heard this song 20 years ago tried to recreate it from memory. It's so surreal, yet nostalgic. But when this way of thinking is in the back of your head while listening, the nostalgia of the compressed synthesizers and the lush pads turn into a weird mind trick, like, should I be enjoying this? Or should I be noticing something is wrong here? I guess that's the fun part.
Once again, I really want to thank Greenio and A Bucket for Jake for helping me with this previous section of the video. If it wasn't for them, this video probably would have never been made at all because of some of my lack of knowledge. So please show them some love with their channels and their whatever social media they use, so link in the description. B33 is not just an excellent mod that encapsulates the feelings of wonder, dread, and reflection, but also a celebration of the cultural mystery surrounding Super Mario 64. For over 27 years, many have fascinated, theorized, created, and took apart this game that could have easily been forgotten with the transition of technology. And even with my breakdowns, thoughts, and having other people come on to help me explain what they see either in music or the game itself, it will continue to inspire people to twist it into something else of their own. Even now, I'm sitting here reading this in my bedroom with the lights off and it's dark outside, and of course I keep thinking about the slow lullaby from Eel Graveyard. The flashes of levels and corridors I visited will remain as a melting canvas that never forms a full picture in my mind. Even now, with 1.0 just around the corner, that's right, this mod is somehow still in a beta, which is funny. These secrets will still be revealed to us over time, either through digging through the files or just general exploration. To call B3313 a ROM hack is an understatement. It's a realization, an enigma, a memory. It's the moment where you feel like a kid again. It was better back then. It was just you, this strange game that you found at your local game shop. The world around you almost came to a stop, and the only thing progressing was the day or night as you played it long after you finished your homework. And after you turned off the console, your imagination flourished and created new worlds only seen in your dreams. Now, you're sitting there older, either finishing school, raising a family, or just reflecting back on those melancholy memories, frozen in time. Even if the game has never changed, you personalize the game yourself. This is the Super Mario 64 that you remember, and it will never forget you.